welcome guys to another episode of Gym Goss, and we are here with Sebastian from Taiwan. Welcome, Seb. Welcome, Jackson. Jackson's injured himself again, guys. He's got the hiccup, so apologies in advance for that. And as always, apologies if Sam's humor is a little too dry. He's deep.
Cognitively still there, Jackson. We're physically.
I can tell you that your tolerance for my hiccups is very small.
No, physically, I've waned, but cognitively, I'm hanging in there at least at times.
Well, that's good to know.
This might be one of those times.
Listeners. So, Seb, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I'm sure a lot of our listeners might not be familiar with you because you're on the other side of the Australian pond over in Taiwan. So, talk to us about yourself, man. What do you do with your coaching? And you're obviously a physique competitor. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you so much, guys, for inviting me. So yeah, my name is Sebastian. I am actually from Chile, but I've been living in Taiwan for a bit more than 6 years. I also have a fitness YouTube channel and a fitness Instagram account, mainly directed to a Chinese speaking audience. I'm also a WNBF professional men's physique competitor, and I turned pro in Singapore actually while living here in Taiwan. And I just, love training, learning about nutrition, but I'm definitely far less educated than any of you guys here. So I'm just really honored to be chatting with you all.
It's a pleasure to have you, man. And don't worry, Jackson's not very well educated either.
Keep those compliments coming, though.
Far too much education at the moment. So, no, welcome, man. And thanks for joining us. So when did you become a pro? What year?
2019.
So recent.
Yeah, a few years ago.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. And in today's episode, guys, we're going to talk about contest prep. Obviously, this is something that's very relevant for the boys. Sam's 2 days out from his first show, the Natural Bodybuilding Association here in Melbourne.
I saw the condition. Wow, this is impressive.
Yeah, still,
it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, I know. But once you're on the
thank
stage,
you.
it's different.
Yeah, competing next year, if all things go to plan and he doesn't do anything stupid over in Bali. And Seb, when are you looking to compete next, Seb? Have you got stage plans?
Yeah, next year, WNBF Taiwan. The second pro show will be held in April. We don't have a specific date right now, but I'm sure it will happen on that month.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You've already started prep, have you, Seb? So you're starting early, are you?
Yeah, I'm currently trying to figure out my maintenance. So testing out for about 2 weeks where I'm at. I have a pretty good idea that I might be around 2,500 calories because I'm pretty inactive actually. My job is basically sitting at the computer a lot. So all I do in terms of activities, go to the gym and do like 10,000 steps a day. Apart from that, not much. So I'm just trying to figure out whether that the 2,500 calories that I have in mind, it's actually my maintenance. So I'm testing it out for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll go from there.
And how much do you weigh, Seb?
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
I am right now 80 kilos.
That makes a bit of sense.
What was your last stage weight?
72.5.
Okay.
Damn. And Jackson, you're sitting what, 1 or 99, 100?
I'm sitting at a very soft and flat 103.
Yeah.
I can't wait to weigh 103 kilos. I tell you what.
And Sam 69 kilos.
Sam 67.9 at 4:30 in the morning today.
Oh geez. Wow. You blow away in the wind.
20 kilos down, Jackson, from absolute peak mass.
Yeah.
A lot of weight. So let's talk about that. So Sam, with your prep, obviously you've lost 20 kilos, and that's a lot of weight to lose in a year. And
all from the cheeks.
Yeah, all from the cheeks. You've got the gaunt looking face happening there. So in your prep, Sam, I know everyone has quite a unique approach to prep. Jackson, you're very much set your macros and then, follow structured meal plan. very much towards the old, sort of bro style. Off season looks different, but you're very structured, regimented with, your meals and stuff. Sam, you're similar, but you obviously, from what I do know, track your calories and you're a bit more adaptive with your meals on the fly around your main meals. Has that changed over the prep? So talk about, I guess, your approach to your meal planning and preparation from start to finish of the prep, and has that changed?
Yeah, so I guess like early on in the prep, I was probably like decently close to where we thought I would need to be. Like timeline wise, we had kind of like a decent amount of time heading into the show. So we were kind of in the driver's seat because I'd finished like a 10-week cut and lost a decent chunk of weight and was in pretty good shape when we started the prep. So early on, like the meals and stuff, I'm pretty regimented with my meals and eating. Generally speaking, out of prep, like meal prep Sundays are a thing. The only thing that changes like the different volumes of food, maybe ingredients, sub and subbed in, subbed out, things like that. So just really as I've moved through the prep, the main things that have changed is like kind of a reduction in the total variety of different foods that are in the mix. My lunches have pretty much remained that process that every Sunday, when I cook mine and Kayla's lunches every week, that's the same. It's been the same process the entire time. There's just been, a few minor changes like reducing, say, potato or taking sweet potato out, increasing pumpkin, changing the portion sizes there. So really, I've had my same set meals all the way throughout and just kind of like modulated what is involved at each meal. And as we've gotten closer, it's like kind of things are stripping away. That flexibility, that variety goes a little bit like, at the moment, not the recent week, because it's like obviously peak week and things are a little bit different in terms of heading into the show. But, it's like yogurts, berries. It's like even just the variety of berries, like you reduce it and just go, okay, I'm just going to stick to one. Meal timing's been pretty regular as well. So I think like, that's only been really the last probably like 4 or 5 weeks. It's been like very, very much structured in the sense of it's like basically a carbon copy nearly every day. As we got further on, like my lunches were always the same, breakfast were always very similar. It's like portions changed, but then dinners were changing regularly in terms of, might have kangaroo, might have like chicken, might have fish, might have an English muffin or a wrap and things like that. But it's like, and then it just like the variety just reduced. And then it was just like just one thing. And then it's like, if it's not that, then it's changed to something else completely or just removed. So yeah, I'm probably eating like all of like 20 different foods, which is not a lot when you really consider it.
No, it's not.
Like including veg and stuff.
That's quite necessary to obviously mitigate a lot of the food focus.
It makes it super easy. Like I haven't experienced hunger once. Like I'm not hungry.
Which is crazy.
That's fine.
Yeah. So that's obviously beneficial for making sure you're not occupied thinking about food all the time, as well as feeling satiated and just decreasing the likelihood of decision fatigue, I guess. So Jackson, with your approach to prep, I'm sure you've at least started to think about how you're going to attack things next year. Are you someone who likes to transition from, say, tracking macros each day, weigh it, measure it, plug it in, and then over time move towards like a meal plan where you're just weighing it, you're not tracking anymore, you've got your meal plan that you follow that hits your calories and your macros, and then just stick to something that's less, I guess, not playing macro Tetris every day? Or are you not fast tracking all the way through?
Yeah, so my approach has changed fairly substantially over probably the last few years as a coach and like experimentation with clients and watching the results, trialing different approaches. Early on, I was more than happy to just have rolling macros and let sort of preference and what I felt like that day dictate the food source selections, assuming that the macros were hit by the end of the day, and then well, I was relatively content with that. But the more that I have gone on, the less and less, the more and more I'm moving away from that approach, and the much more preferred I am to adopt more of a structured, regimented plan. Now, I understand that that level of regimentation is not for everybody, particularly those that we consider Gen Pop, that perhaps might just want to drop a couple of kilos for the summer. But in terms of athletes, I think there are notable advantages to having that level of regimentation and precision. Now, one of the reasons is, of course, what you touched on before, is the psychological aspect, just not having to deal with the decision fatigue every day, to basically, like you said, play macro Tetris and decide what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat, and what foods you're going to have. And that decision fatigue basically becomes more and more of a detriment the deeper you get into prep, when your food focus increases, your preoccupation with different food sensations and tastes that you might feel like basically just complicates the process. And you can get into this scenario where you, at the end of the day, and you've got 450 calories left, and you might spend 45 minutes trying to work out what sort of tasty concoction you can whip up to fill that 450 calories in the tastiest way possible. Now, that is just not an efficient source of your mental resources at that point in prep. Now, the other reasons that I'm leaning to more of a regimented approach these days is just becoming from a monitoring progress aspect. Now, if you are just rolling with macros, and so you're just eating building carbs and fats day to day, but the food sources are changing day to day, that also means that your fiber intake most likely is going to be changing, or at least the sources of fiber is going to be changing, which can have impacts on food residue in the gut, digestion times. It can also mean that your sodium intake is probably going to be changing day to day. Now, just those things in combination, they can have profound effects on your day-to-day weigh-ins, purely just from food residue and changes in body water. Now, if you're using the scale to dictate your dietary changes, that basically complicates the process, because now you're seeing fluctuations in body weight that aren't necessarily dictative of changes in tissue mass. So that's one thing that basically makes your dietary adjustments more inaccurate or less likely to be accurate. The other issue, and most notably as sort of you're getting into the deeper stages of prep, where your body fat's quite low, and small changes in food residue in the gut and extracellular water can have profound effects on your look. If you are changing that sodium intake and fiber intake on a day-to-day, purely just from changing food sources, one day you might look fucking awesome, and then the next day, all of a sudden you look blurred out and soft, and you've hit your macros on the spot. But now you're in your head, and you feel like you're fat, you've gained fat, and now you start doubting the process. Now, that's just another issue that you don't want to have to deal with in prep. And that is an issue that can be avoided from keeping your foods relatively consistent. Now, one final thing that I'll talk about comes from meal timing and meal frequency. Now, a lot of the flexible dieters, they sort of say, it doesn't matter how many meals you have, as long as you hit your macros by the end of the day, that's sort of only what really matters. But we've actually had a new study that just come out recently, and I'm going to talk about it on Instagram soon, which showed that there was two groups. One group had 6 meals per day for 14 weeks, and the other group had basically a variable meal frequency and meal timing. So they could have 3 to 9 meals for the 14 weeks. And so we had a consistent meal frequency timing group and a variable meal frequency and timing group. And at the end of the 14 weeks, they showed that there was significant increases in the thermic effect of feeding in the consistent meal timing group, which means they're basically burning more calories from the thermic effect of food, and it was a reasonable amount. Like from just in a 3-hour monitoring period, it was 77 kilojoules per hour versus 99 kilojoules per hour. Now, in the latter phases of a prep, that is the ability to impact the change for sure. And the other thing that was probably more of a concern when you're getting into those nasty stages of prep was that one of the appetite regulating hormones, GLP-1, it basically favored the consistent meal frequency, meal timing group to show that they had lower appetite sensations, lower hunger than the variable group. So with the bros who have been doing these like 6 meals per day at the same time, 2.5, 3 hours spaced apart, where sort of us in the evidence-based community bashed that for some time, starting to look like, okay, there's actually probably some research to support that approach. And the flexible dieters were maybe having 3 meals one day, but then having 4 meals and a couple of snacks the next day and varying it, that they're probably giving a detriment to themselves. So they're just some of the reasons why I'm leaning more and more to a regimented approach. But with that said, this is in the context of an athlete looking to optimize the competitive outcome. And for people who are just trying to sort of drop a couple of kilos and those small percentage margins probably don't matter for them, then perhaps more flexibility might be preferable for those guys.
Yeah, and I think we see anecdotally a lot of physique competitors gravitate towards that consistent, 4 to 6 meals per day.
I've been doing.
Less, variety in the diet, all of those kind of things. But I feel what a lot of people don't see now on social media is that side of the prep, because it is not as exciting. They're not getting away with eating all the glorious foods. They're not doing anything extreme. So there's nothing exciting or Instagram worthy for that. So a lot of competitors go into prep almost blind to what they should be doing in the back end of prep, which is, a more quote unquote bro approach. So that's really interesting. I'll be keen to see that study. Who's the authors of that paper, Jackson?
I've got it up here. Al-Hussein.
Al-Hussein, yeah.
Yeah.
SSEIN, yeah.
Yeah.
SSN. Yeah.
And don't you dare fucking post an infographic before I post it.
I'm absolutely going to do that, man. That's what I'm going to be doing. As soon as we go off this call, I'm going to beat you to the punch. No, I just want to read the study. And Seb, talk to us about your prep in 2019 where you got your pro cards. So obviously that's a monumental feat. That's every bodybuilder's goal, is to, acquire that hardware and pro status. So what did your nutrition look like in that prep? Was it something that was similar to what Jackson was outlining earlier, or did you have a more flexible approach? What did the overall diet design look like?
Yeah, so well, for that prep, I coach myself. So it was a little bit different to what I'm doing now with Cliff. But yeah, it was enough for me to get the pro card. I guess what I did was keeping my meals pretty consistent, similar to like what you guys were saying. Still getting a variety of highly nutritious foods, especially from different vegetables and colors and things like that. Sticking to lean proteins, getting my healthy fats, right, from foods and from supplements as well. And just, I started with a certain amount of calories and then just kept reducing that. And if at any point I encounter like a plateau, something like that, I will take perhaps a diet break and then reduce my training a little bit, try to find my maintenance, and then continue cutting my calories after that. I have to say though, I did get my pro card. I was happy with that. However, that wasn't my best condition. I thought that I could have done a lot better than that. As you guys may have experienced, when you're competing, you're trying to bring your best package and you do the best you can, right? At the same time, the judges are the ones that are going to be looking at you on stage and they're going to decide who wins. That doesn't mean that the version that's on a stage on that day is the best version you can be, right? Because eventually, I got a lot better for my next show. So what I'm trying to say here is that, yeah, I did get my pro card, but I think it also depended a lot on the competitors that came to the show that day. So yeah, I'm proud of what I did, but I could have done a lot better if I'm making any sense here with my prep and with my training.
Yeah, no, totally understand. I think that's a huge component of bodybuilding. I think I'd say a fair chunk of athletes don't care as long as they get the W, and if they got a pro card, they'd be stoked. But I would also say that the best athletes, or at least the better athletes who are really serious and love what they do and take a lot of pride in their work, which is generally going to be the elite guys, would not be happy getting a pro card or winning if they were underdone or not looking as best they could. So that's interesting. And so how does your approach now with Cliff, because we all know that Cliff Wilson has absolutely no idea about what he's doing when it comes to bodybuilding. I've spoken to Cliff before, and I think he's one of the pioneers in bodybuilding, especially when it comes to the peaking side of things. For listeners, check him out. He does great work. So how do things look now in comparison to the previous prep? What's different with Cliff?
Well, a massive difference is that now I'm taking a lot more time to prep, right? What I thought before was enough for me is not enough for Cliff. So before for my when I got my pro card, I think I prepped for like 12 weeks. And now I'm taking like 20 weeks to go through the same process, right? So I definitely miscalculated how much time I needed to get show ready. And I think that's a big mistake a lot of competitors make. Even sometimes competitors that do have some experience competing, is that they don't take enough time to prep, to account for mistakes or for challenges that you may encounter along the way.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's an interesting point. Let's explore that a little bit further. I think there's a very fine balance between getting the length long enough and give yourself enough time versus a prep that could be too long, because the way I see it, as we know, the psychology of an athlete is usually what can snap and break towards the end of a prep. Some athletes just can go through and keep dieting and it's not too much of an issue. I would say that generally depends on how much weight they've lost in an absolute sense, the time of dieting, as well as their psychology and all those sort of things. But I feel sometimes a longer prep, Jackson, I'll get your thoughts on this, can break an athlete and can definitely be detrimental, just like a shorter prep is, not long enough to get into true stage condition. How do you find the sweet spot for the prep duration? It's obviously a very calculated, determination of how long an athlete needs. You work out how much, fat mass they're carrying, how much, they need to lose, weekly rate of loss, and you reverse engineer from there. You plan in a few buffer weeks and whatnot, but let's say that things don't go to plan. How do you then adjust, and what do you do to make sure that you've got the time frame right to ensure that you can get them ready, but it's not too long or too short?
Yeah, so generally, and I have developed a decent eye from this now. I didn't have this skill when I started as a coach, but now it has improved a fair bit. Basically, I can get pretty close to predicting what their weight will be close to their ideal condition. And then once I have that end goal weight and the starting weight, basically I will target around 0.6% body weight losses per week. Now, basically it's going to be faster than that at the start of the prep, and then it's going to be slower than that and at the end of the prep, but it averages out to be around 0.6% body weight losses per week. And then that gives you amount of weeks that you need to lose that required weight. And then I'll add 20% duration on that to allow for diet breaks if needed, screw up weeks that are almost surely going to happen, and just like unforeseen circumstances like grandma died or something, you just couldn't sort of nail the job.
Rode into a tree in Bali kind of thing.
That's random stuff like that. So that's basically my approach. And basically what it means you've got time up your sleeve, but it also means it's not so dragged out that you run the risk of over dieting, because over dieting is a very real thing. And some of the listeners perhaps who don't follow more of the pro bodybuilding scene, like you just have to look at James Hollingshead, who competed at the Mr. Olympia just gone. Like, he looked fucking awesome 6 weeks out from his show. He was peeled and full. And then him and his coach went looking for this sort of magical 1% improvement in condition. And it basically just screwed the whole look. And he was flat and soft. And he looked way worse than he did at 6 weeks out. And the telltale sign of that being over dieting was that he's increased his food substantially for the next 3 weeks post show, and he's still flat. So that just shows like how depleted that he was going to the show. So over dieting is a very real thing. And another thing that needs to be considered is maintaining peeled condition. While it is easier than what takes to get to that condition, it still is very taxing. And the longer that you're asking an athlete to do that, the harder and harder it is going to be for the athlete to stay dialed in.
Yep. So how long do you allow generally for, say, do you like to get your athletes prepared? Well, I do anyway. I like to get my athletes prepared a couple of weeks early, depending on the division. So obviously, you know, bikini competitors, it's, you know, pretty much just straight into the show. Physique competitors, maybe 2-3 weeks early. Bodybuilders, maybe around a month, 5 weeks early, and then reverse into the show and basically do the true bodybuilding peak. That's my general approach. Do you do something similar, or?
Yeah, I don't like them being ready any longer than 3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks out. So usually with my approach, if like we usually lose some weeks just to some random things and some plateaus that we didn't expect and things like that. But usually we land somewhere around like ready in 2 to 3. Sometimes things don't always go to plan, and sometimes you're just going to have to grind all the way through and do sort of a revised peak. But that's the nature of the game. You don't get it spot on every single time. But ideally, sort of ready for 2 weeks so you can trial some of those loading processes and you're not sort of flying blind into peak week.
And I should just note that when I said 5 weeks, I was talking from, say, to their last show. So there'd be shows in between
gotcha.
there as well. So yes, probably matches up quite well. So Sam, how long have you been around this? Well, you're 60, sub 68 now, but you've been tinkering around there for quite a while now. How long has it been before this first show? 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah, it'd have to be. Oh, let me have a look. I can just get it up. Can't get it up, but I'll find the weight. It's been, what are we? I'm in my 23rd week of prep now, which is a long time. Bearing in mind I had a month of maintenance. So
yep, because we had all the hoo-ha here.
Wouldn't have been the hardest grind on diet though, would it?
No, I think last week was getting a bit flatter, but I've been in the 69s for pretty much 3.5 weeks now, with not a weigh-in above 70. Yeah, 3.5 weeks.
Yep.
So that's pretty low. But again, like when we started the prep, the number that we can't, like, if we look at, Jackson knows my the template that I use for tracking my weight and everything, and like along the right hand side, I just projected what I thought I'd be getting to, and that was about 67, like mid to high 67s, and that is pretty much where we are now. Like,
and
probably like bang on there.
The interesting thing about that is it's been, for listeners and for you guys, 8 years between shows for Sam. And his last stage outing, you were what, 60 kilos?
I think I remember weighing in on those like old dodgy digital scales at mum's, like 60.5.
So 8 kilos in 8 years for a natural bodybuilder, but the look is completely different. I know Lane Norton's
I have a beard now.
And the beard as well. Lane Norton's done some research looking at amino acid deposits, basically around, you deposit around 10 grams of amino acid into muscle tissue or lean tissue per day, which is around 70 grams per week from memory, which is not a lot. Jackson, how do you work with your enhanced guys with the introduction of, the the supplement side of things to then estimate stage weight when they get on stage? Because I know for naturals, we have just a lot of less variation when it comes to that stuff. Do you have other complications or ways of knowing what they're going to weigh on stage if you're predicting stage weight, but they're also introducing other, PEDs and whatnot? Does that make things a little bit more complicated?
It can, but generally I just adjust it in the sense that I'll still target the same percent body weight losses per week, but generally the time that they have that is required to get to the predicted stage weight is just shorter in duration. So while like if I have a natural guy, from him to get to the end game, it might take 22 to 25 weeks to lose that same amount of body fat, because basically they're losing body weight at the same rate per week, the natural and the enhanced guy. It's just a greater proportion of that weight is fat than the enhanced guy. So it might only take sort of 16 to 18 weeks for the enhanced guy. So I basically adopt the same rate of body weight losses per week. It means that the prep is slightly shorter in duration.
Yep, that makes sense. Cool. And
can I ask you guys a question?
Of course.
If you guys don't mind. Yeah, I wanted to know more about timing of nutrients that you do during prep, because I know Sam just mentioned that and Jackson as well. So what kind of nutrients are you getting in your body before intra workout and after your workout? And are you doing that just before going into your workout, or an hour before that, 2 hours? Like how soon before and how soon after? If you don't mind sharing.
Are you just talking like timing of just like meals? Or the actual timing, like the distribution of nutrients across the meals, and then the timing?
No, I guess like meal timing. And
right.
Yeah, and say, for example, do you guys, when you're prepping, do you go hard on say, oh, I gotta have making sure that I have a certain amount of protein right before my workout, have my intra-workout carbs, and then right after my workout, I need to have some protein as well, that sort of thing? Or you don't really care about that much in this sense?
Do you want to go, Jackson, or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first, and then you can talk about what you're doing. I care about it a lot, Seb. I care about it more so.
Yeah, I know you mentioned it to me in the last video, so that's what I wanted to explore a little bit more.
I think it matters more so in prep than
than ever.
Sort of when you're sort of just totally fed throughout your whole day, because basically when you are in prep, you're fighting protein balance. Basically, you're fighting negative protein balance. Now, when you are in a calorie deficit, the scales are highly tipped to favor negative protein balance, i.e. sort of muscle loss. Now, when you are doing weight training, that is a catabolic event in itself. So that means that you want to use whatever strategies you can at your disposal to try to mitigate that catabolism. And the way you're going to do that is by applying the nutrients in close proximity to that catabolic event, i.e. before it and after it. So basically, my protein distribution will stay relatively the same, 0.4 to 0.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, consumed 45 minutes before the workout, and as soon as after the workout. Now, people will say, oh, but the anabolic window doesn't matter. There's no advantages to waiting. That's for damn sure. And I think the more advanced you are and the harder your workouts are and the more catabolic they are, the more it is in your favor to consume nutrients in close proximity to that training bout. And we also need to consider that when you are in a depleted state, like we said, it's already tipped to favor negative protein balance. You're going to want to try to flip that scale as quick as possible after that training bout. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is by consuming protein quite quickly after your training. Now, another thing we need to consider is that our daily carbohydrate intake is going to be restricted when we are in a deficit. So we don't have as much to play with. So the distribution of it becomes a little bit more important. Now, we know that when we are in a prep, our training performance and our ability to maintain that performance is most likely going to be the biggest dictator of how much muscle we retain while we're dropping body fat during the prep. So we know that carbohydrates are the fuel for high intensity performance. So we want to allocate those carbohydrates to optimize that performance as best we can. And that is going to be either before or during the workout bout. So if you are training at 3 p.m., it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be consuming a bunch of your carbohydrates at breakfast. You're going to be wanting to consume them in the pre-workout meal around about 2 p.m., where you're going to be able to saturate muscle glycogen, or at least refill it to some reasonable point, and have a high level of blood glucose going into that training bout, because that's going to support the training performance. Is it going to optimize performance? No, but it's going to be a hell of a lot better than sort of having the carbohydrates at breakfast with it already sort of mostly oxidated by the time that you're actually getting to training. Now, the last point is to be having some of those carbohydrates, basically the remainder of your carbohydrates after you've taken the pre-workout carbs out, to have them after your training. Because like we said, training, especially when we're in a caloric deficit, is a catabolic event. Now, carbohydrates, they suppress muscle protein breakdown. We want to do anything that we can to try to tip the scales to favor positive protein balance. So by having carbohydrates, we're able to activate those insulin-mediated anabolic pathways to suppress some of that muscle protein breakdown. Now, the carbohydrates suppressing the muscle protein breakdown in combination with the protein that we're consuming right after the workout to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, that's going to give us the best chance of having a reasonable positive muscle protein state after the workout. And that's going to give us our best chance of maintaining as much muscle during the prep as we can.
And so just real quick with that, what if that is affecting, say, an athlete's adherence to their diet? Say if they don't really want to allocate those carbs for intra-workout, they prefer to have it, I don't know, later at night. Or do you think that, yeah, sorry, Sam?
Yeah, I'd say like that's probably, they're not taking it as seriously as they could be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, yeah, plain and simple. It's
Probably
like,
to be honest.
yeah, I definitely, so everything that Jackson said is like, yeah, what I support. Like my entire, say, approach, and with myself and any of my athletes, you know, even like powerlifting athletes and performance-based athletes, basically, when you're saying you have this competitive goal, well, that's a priority, and we're going to gear as much of our decision-making to supporting that goal and success of that goal as we can. So, you know, like people ask me, like, you know, throughout my prep, oh, you know, what's changing? It's like my training's been the same for like 20 weeks. Like, you know, one change to the program throughout. And then the only other thing is dietary changes as like reduction of calories. It's like nutrition is the biggest thing, and being able to sustain high quality training is very important. So having those two married up nicely is the sport. That is the sport. So if you're going to be competing, but you're not prepared to make some adjustments to what time you eat, what time you're consuming protein, making sure that you are, you know, as Jackson said, timing a meal before you train, you know, making sure you're not, you like consuming all your fats right before training and no carbs just because, oh, I like to eat this, or you're just like, you know, going, oh, I'm going to do all my training fasted, and then you're seeing performance drop. You know, like my performance, say, I'm talking just anecdotally here, my performance personally, like pretty much was linearly improving like week on week on week up until probably like, you know, 20 weeks, 21 weeks. It's like in the last couple of weeks, it's gotten tougher. And that's where it's like physically, that's what I was saying to Jackson before, like physically, I can tell I'm slowing down, but I think it's like gotten to crunch time where it's a matter of, it's really getting challenging to lift the same intensities and the same loads, and they just have to come down in order to maintain form and like, you know, get a good stimulus and things like that. Meal timing is very important. Like it's like my meals, you know, we were talking about it, you know, earlier when we were like what my meals currently look like or how they change throughout. It's like in the early stages of the prep, really far out, because that we have time, there's a little bit more of the, you know, flexibility, but the meal timing itself has been very regimented the entire time. And if you can structure training at a consistent time as well, that's going to further benefit like your outcomes as well. Again, Jackson spoke earlier about how that this study whoever it was that did it, and just the regularity in meals and how that had a positive impact. Well, regularity in training time is going to have a positive impact on training outcomes, right? And if you can always eat at roughly the same times, you're training at the same times, I go to bed at the same time, I was able to sleep and wake up at the same time, right? Those types of regularities, they're the things that make the biggest difference, I feel, in terms of making a prep easier to adhere to, right? It's like, it doesn't mean you want to like do it necessarily. Like you might not want to go to bed at 9:30 every night, but it's like, it's probably in your best interest to, not go to bed 9:30 one night, 11:30 the next night, and have these random sleeping cycles. Cause then that, that's going to flow on. And maybe now your first meal is 2 hours later because you stayed up an hour and a half later watching a movie. And that, that's going to throw what time you're eating your next meal for training. And now you've had a shorter window, and you have to eat again. You go, I don't want to eat now. I'm just going to go and train fasted. And then that's not necessarily advantageous. So I think trying to be as systematic and regimented with all of the big rocks of like, what is a contest prep? Like these are the pillars that will ultimately make you successful or not. Right. And doing them over time is very, very crucial, particularly when sleep starts to suffer. Right. If you're sleep suffering, right, man, like that's already a big knock. If you're like not timing meals well around training, and it's like, that's going to negatively impact performance. Like that's another big knock against like two massive objectives of, preserving muscle, preserving performance to sustain muscle mass and be successful. So yeah, you got to be prepared to make some adjustments to overall lifestyle if you're going to be sustaining a prep.
And I think on that, very good points in regards to just consistency across the board, because it does reduce the noise and allows you to pick up the signal.
And that too as well.
Obviously muscle retention, the signal that's driving, fat loss, all those sorts of things. But to your point about nutrient timing, I think the only occasion where you could maybe sacrifice a little bit of the optimality side of things when it comes to timing protein, carbohydrate, post workout sort of thing, is if calories get so low that adherence is suffering, that the individual doesn't have the calorie allotment to disperse their calories at the times that they're training to optimize their performance and recovery and those sorts of things, then you can shave off a little bit of that optimality in favor of adherence. So if you have somebody who's, say, eating like 1,400 calories and they want to have, say, they've got to fast a little bit in the morning, even though Jackson will bang them on the head for fasting or something like that, but they have to fast in the morning because it's just, otherwise they're eating like 300 calories at a meal and it's just like they're starving, right? That's just hard. If they have to fast a little bit in the morning and train faster because they have to do it before work, for example, and then have their first meal when they get to work, that might be an occasion where you sacrifice a little bit of optimality for the sustainability of the diet. But if you've got the option and if you've got, the calories to play with, and you are serious about it, you'll design everything to optimize your nutrition and training, as Jackson said. But I think there are some cases, extreme cases, where
definitely
you have to prioritize adherence to calorie deficit, because if they need to get leaner, that's the goal.
And there's definitely those.
What's that, Jackson?
Just don't cry if you lose.
Yeah, but there is definitely those individual variances that
someone would lose by training fasted a couple of days a week and having a meal straight after.
Yeah. If we're talking about a high level
in a vacuum, if you've probably
second, like that could.
If they do it for a couple of weeks at the end of a prep.
Okay, a couple of weeks, maybe not, but
like. Oh, not for, I don't think they'd get to that elite level in the first place. I'm talking about making those changes at the end of prep when calories are really in the shitter, and like there's situations where you have to then prioritize adherence. So I'm not talking about this is how you set the prep up from start to finish kind of thing. Yeah.
There's definitely going to be times throughout a prep where like you have to make some consolations, because life is not that perfect, as like we all know. Like shit does happen, and that it's like you consider even Mick May Jacob, like this is one of the athletes who's competing with me in a couple of days. Like he's a tradie. It's like, if he's on call or something, well, there's no option around it with work, but we can still do our best to optimize things within our individual circumstances. So if you're a physique competitor, and you can still be a physique competitor, you might want to be the best that you can be. And that's what we should all really be striving for. But it's like, if you have to train at different times of the day, then that means that you'll eat at different times of the day, or the meals that you have might get shuffled around a little bit. So it's like you have your pre-workout meal, and that's a fixed meal, and it's the same meal every time in the pre-workout window, but it's like the time that you consume it is different. I guess when that's the situation, it's like we're still controlling those variables. The only difference is you do have an additional layer of complexity, because now it's like, for me, it's like I could tell you exactly what I eat at every meal, and I can tell you what time I'm going to eat them within like maybe 30 or 40 minutes. Except if there's some confounding factor, it's like I might push it out by a fraction, right? But it's like, that means I have predictability when I like weigh in the morning and I go to bed and things like that. It's like these people who do have to make those, okay, well, I need to train earlier tomorrow, so I can't eat in the morning. That means I'm going to push food back, right? They're still, if they're controlling all of their meals and they're still, being regimented, and it's like, well, I'm still having 5 meals, just the orders changing of my day and the consumption, whatever. Like, they're still controlling all the same variables, but they just have slight differences within that, right? So again, it's like optimizing it for the individual. And at a point, you just have to consider those, like, yeah, if the individual wants to get to stage, then getting them to stage is really the main priority, and doing whatever is absolutely necessary. But the person that you were saying in your hypothetical, I think, who didn't want to make changes because of adherence, like, yeah, if you can, like reverting back to that, if you can make those adjustments, it's probably in your best interest to do so, unless it's like truly impractical, or yeah, if it's not a priority, then
that person was me in the past. Now I'm actually
okay. now you're the latter.
Now with Cliff, Cliff is actually putting an emphasis on this, right? On the timing of these nutrients around my workout. And
yeah,
now,
good.
For example, I'm having like carbohydrates intra workout, something that I didn't used to do in the past. And I do feel like it's really helping me. But I do want to know your opinion.
I don't have like intra workout carbohydrates, not now.
Okay.
Because I don't have enough I don't have enough carbohydrates to justify that.
2 weeks out, right?
2 days.
Oh, 2 days out.
So, but it's like I time my training is at 11:30 and I have my oats at 10:30.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like I have a high carb, like moderate protein, low fat meal, right? Like within an hour of training.
I think if you're a competitive athlete, at some point you need to flick the mental switch and realize that it comes a little bit about not trying to make the process so much funner and easier,
glamorous,
trying to get the best result possible. Like for Seb's example about of him not wanting to like move some of his carbs to his pre-workout meal because he liked them having somewhere else in the day. That'd be like a professional footballer rocking up to training, like, guys, like, not really a fan of doing our training in the afternoon. How about we just shift it to
I can imagine you saying that. I can imagine you rocking up to rowing and being like, guys, this water's a little bit chilly today.
Yeah, like,
I don't want the paddle to flick this cold water on my back. Can we wait for a warmer day? I can see you doing that, Jackson.
Exactly. That would tell you to get fucking stuff. Like that. So I don't know. It's weird. Like bodybuilders, sometimes we think we're a little bit special, and that we should try to make the process so much fun and, like Sam said, glamorous. But in a lot of other sports, for some reason, they just seem to realize that you just suck it up and dig in, and that's part and parcel of the process.
Yeah. It's a sucky sport, like when you have to starve yourself for such a long period of time. Like, but you have to embrace that, right? You have to be prepared for that. Jacob, if you need to jump off, you can get the fuck off. We'll continue to chat.
You guys continue. Matt, Seb, pleasure to meet you, bro. Chat to you
it's only going to get better from here.
It's all up. Catch you, man.
That's it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.